guys. So this uh, theme of uh, articles is basically connected to my readings of The Birth Earth and the Eugenics by Philippa Levine. Um, at least in terms of the control over people's bodies and the lack of bodily autonomy. This isn't necessarily eugenic, but I would see this as like there is elements of this. Alright, let's get to it. This is a bit unfortunate. Alright. Fertility fraud is the failure on the part of a fertility doctor to obtain consent from a patient before inseminating her with his own sperm. This normally occurs in the context of people using assisted reproductive technology to address fertility issues. The term is also used in cases where donor eggs are used without consent, and more broadly, in instances where doctors and other medical professionals exploit opportunities that arise when people use assisted reproductive technology to address fertility issues. This may give rise to a number of different types of fraud involving insurance, unnecessary reproductive procedures, theft of eggs, and other issues related to fertility treatment. Alright, basically a repo man at this point, in probably since forever, but it's probably easier now. Um, Stealing your data, genetic information. Alright, egg theft. The first test tube baby was facilitated by Robert Edwards in 1978, and he allegedly used eggs without the consent of the woman involved. One of the earliest cases involving egg theft occurred in 1987 in Garden Grove, California, in a clinic run by Dr. Ricardo Ash and his partners, Dr. Sergio Stone and Jose Balmaceda. Ash took eggs from a woman undergoing diagnostic procedures and used them in fertility procedures in other women. Ash and his two partners were accused of taking eggs and embryos from patients without their consent, using them to cause pregnancies in other women, and defrauding insurance companies. The eggs of at least 20 women were used, and at least 15 live births resulted. 35 patients filed legal actions against Ash. An estimated 67 women were victims of egg and embryo theft. Ash and Balmaceda left the country and avoided trial. What, just like that? Okay. Stone faced trial in the case, and he was sentenced to 3 years, probation for mail fraud. That's it? Wow. He was fined $50,000 by the judge in the case, required to repay more than $14,000 in restitution to insurance companies, and had to wear an electronic monitor device. Alright, well, at that point, he's just like a criminal, so yeah, put him on lockdown. In his own home, I guess. In the. Or no, put him on an. Anyways, I'm not going to go any further. In the egg affair in Israel in 2000, police investigated two doctors who were accused of intentionally creating extra eggs in patients needing fertility procedures, and then, without their patients' knowledge, harvesting and selling the eggs to other fertility patients. In Italy in 2016, famed Italian gynecologist Severino Antonari, known as grandmother's obstetrician because of his reputation for helping women over 60 to bear children, was arrested on suspicion of stealing eggs by removing them from a patient's ovaries without her consent under the guise of performing a procedure on her to remove an ovarian cyst. Antonari had recently hired a Spanish nurse at his clinic and then diagnosed her with an ovarian cyst for the sole purpose of harvesting her eggs without her knowledge. Antinari was arrested at a Rome airport, charged with aggravated robbery and causing personal injury, and placed under house arrest. Insemination fraud. There have been numerous cases of healthcare provider fraudulently substituting their own sperm for donor sperm, resulting in pregnancy and birth. This is like probably a power trip thing for these people. It's probably not all like for the state and like the medicalization of the location. It's just because these people are freaks. All right, Quincy Fortier, a fertility specialist in Las Vegas, Nevada, in the early 1960s, impregnated female patients with his own sperm, leading to 26 children during his 40-year practice. He died in 2006, aged 94, and the story was uncovered only in 2018 when a woman used a home DNA test to celebrate her retirement. Uh, wait. Wow. The HBO documentary Baby God, aired in 2020, was based on the story of Fortier and his decades-long fertility fraud scheme. Cecile Jacobson, a fertility doctor in the 1980s in Virginia, was originally found to be a biological father of at least 7 of his patients' children, including one patient who is supposed to have been inseminated with sperm provided by her husband. DNA tests have since linked Jacobson to at least 15 such children, and has been suspected that he fathered as many as 75 children by impregnating patients with his own sperm. He could not be prosecuted because no law existed in Virginia prohibiting it. What the fuck? Okay then. That's just, there's no words for how gross that is, obviously. In 2018, a woman in Washington State filed suit in U.S. District Court in Idaho against Gerald Mortimer, who was her mother's fertility doctor when her parents resided in Idaho Falls. After having difficulty becoming pregnant, her mother sought help from Mortimer and eventually became pregnant in the 1980s. The connection to Mortimer was hidden for 37 years until it was finally revealed when the now adult daughter used a DNA kit which returned the connection to Mortimer as her biological father, who had used his sperm rather than an anonymous donor as agreed. Gross, obviously. Donald Klein used his own sperm in a fertility practice in Indianapolis between 1974 and 1987 to covertly father at least 94 offspring. This came to light in 2014 when his home DNA test kit were proliferating and led to the discovery of Klein having used his own sperm to fertilize his patient's eggs. So you would think that since these are his test kits, he would probably think twice. Maybe he wanted people to know, maybe, and he's just like proud of it, even though it was gonna come down hard on him. Unlike, wow, okay. Because there was no law considering the practice in Indiana, he was charged with obstruction of justice, false advertising, and immoral conduct, and lost his license to practice medicine. Good. Klein pleaded guilty to 2 level 6 felony counts of obstruction of justice and received 1 year suspended sentence. The first law in the United States came in effect in 2019 in the state of Indiana as a result of this case. As of May 2022, Klein has paid over $1.35 million to settle 3 lawsuits, with 3 more pending. Similar cases were found in other states. John Boyd Coates III, a Vermont fertility doctor, has 2 lawsuits filed against him and has been charged with using his own sperm in cases going back 40 years. His license has been revoked and a $5.25 million judgment in damages was awarded to the first plaintiff. Joe Beek, Hoes Beek, a gynecologist in Netherlands. Oh, by the way, you would be surprised. Most gynecologists are probably men because most of the medicalization of a woman's body is men. So yeah, gynecologist in the Netherlands conceived 21 children and potentially dozens more using his own sperm after prospective parents turned to him for fertility treatment. An investigation has discovered he worked at Elizabeth Hospital in Leerdorp, now part of how do you pronounce that? Hospital between 1973 and 1998. He died in 2019. In September 2020, a San Diego woman sued Dr. Philip M. Milgram for having used his own sperm to inseminate her 3 decades earlier, instead of anonymous donor sperm. The deception was discovered when her adult son found that Milgram was his biological father after using a home DNA test kit from 23andMe. In November 2020, a Northern California woman sued her former fertility doctor, Michael Keigan, for having falsely inseminated her with his own sperm 40 years prior. She bore 2 children, but only learned in 2019 from a DNA test kit that her daughter had received as a gift showed that her former fertility doctor is her children's biological father. In addition, her children may have an inherited genetic disease passed on by Keiken. Jan Karbat, a fertility doctor in the Netherlands, fathered 90 confirmed children and may have as many as 200 children. He died in 2017. Well, his legacy is, gross, passed on, I guess. In 2021, Norman Barwin, an Ottawa fertility doctor, paid out a settlement of $13.375 million to his 17 children conceived in his clinic in Canada in the 1980s. A total of 244 former patients and their children, including the 17 conceived using his own sperm, are among the claimants. In April 2022, the Colorado jury awarded $8.75 million to the families of dozens of women who became pregnant while being treated for infertility using artificial insemination techniques by Dr. Paul Brennan Jones of Grand Junctions, who used his own sperm while the women were his patients in the 1980s. The jury found Jones liable for negligence, fraud, and other claims. Jeez, just raping the community, of course. So again, this is not necessarily a pro-natalist thing, but I can see it as like a branch of the worry of the declining fertility of certain demographics, and so of course doctors have to rape women, unfortunately, because they're sick. Yeah, these people will go as far as pretty much to do anything, unfortunately. There are many other types of fertility fraud, and they may take place at various stages of the process. Competing for patients via misleading information about success rates, either in advertising or during personal interviews, performing an assisted reproductive technology procedure not covered by insurance, and then billing for a different procedure. 3. Performing unnecessary or futile procedures on patients who are misinformed or poorly misinformed. Yeah, basically just experimentation on someone. False claims of pregnancy followed by assertions of fetal deaths. Misuse of sperm, eggs, and embryos, in particular a healthcare person substituting their own sperm for donor sperm. Inadequate screening of donors. Embezzlement for sperm banks. Theft of human eggs. Egg snatching, or embryos, or use of eggs without consent. Alright, legal status. Hundreds of children have been fathered by non-consensual insemination worldwide by their physicians, including the United States, Canada, and Netherlands, without specific laws outlawing it. The legal consequences are unclear. Sometimes other laws related to fertility fraud are used against the physicians, such as mail, travel, wire fraud, while other faces civil suits. Some physicians have faced ethics charges by the governing bodies of the professions and lost their license to practice medicine. In the United States, medical students in 1960s and 1970s donated sperm, and later, while trying to develop their practice as a physician, may have gone to use their own sperm in order to establish a track record of success. Oof, whatever that success is, what the hell? There were no laws on the books at the time prohibiting such activity. Activists have pushed for legislation that would make fertility fraud a crime, and as of February 2022, Only 7 U.S. states have passed laws, and 7 others were considering it. That's really disgusting, honestly. In the scope, in the United States, wait, the scope? What does that mean? In the United States, over 50 fertility doctors have been accused of fraud and intention with donating sperm, according to February 2022 news report. Alright, that's really messed up. I'll see you guys. Oh, wait. No. On to the next article. Alright, that's messed up. And here's more messed up stuff, unfortunately. Sperm donation is largely unregulated in the US, as we have seen since only 7 states have freaking outlawed it. Fertility fraud have outlawed it, but that could change soon, apparently. When Wendy and Janet Norman decided to have a baby, they went sperm shopping through Zytex Corp, a sperm bank. A couple chose donor 9623. Zytex, the Normans later claimed, told them the man spoke multiple languages and was pursuing a doctorate. Zytex had also assured them that it carefully screened all donors by reviewing their family health history and criminal records, and that it subjected donors to intensive physical exams and interviews to verify the information. But after Wendy Norman gave birth to a son in 2002, the couple learned their child had inherited a genetic blood disorder for which Wendy was not a carrier. He would soon, much later, require extended hospitalization because of suicidal and homicidal thoughts. Even later, they learned that the doctor, James Christopher Eggles, had lied to the sperm bank about his background, and that the sperm bank had not verified the information he provided. Nor did it make him supply his medical records or sign a release that would make it possible to obtain them. As law professions who study reproductive technology, we see this case and others like it as it's showing why the government should tighten regulation over sperm and egg donation so that prospective parents and donor-conceived adults receive accurate and complete details about their donor's medical, academic, and criminal history. A wrongful birth. Eggles wasn't pursuing an advanced degree when he began donating sperm. He didn't even have a college degree at that point. He also failed to disclose his diagnosis of schizophrenia, a severe mental health condition requiring lifelong treatment. Schizophrenia has a high level of heritability in families. He had also been arrested at the time of his donation and was later incarcerated for burglary. What the hell? When Norman sued Zytex, a local court initially dismissed almost all claims in the case. They appealed to Georgia's Supreme Court, which in 2020 allowed several of their claims to go forward. The Normans could, for instance, seek financial compensation, partly to cover the additional expenses they might have avoided had they learned about the donor's medical history sooner. The court also told the Normans they could try to cover the price difference between what they paid for the sperm they received and its market value. Finally, the Normans were allowed to allege under the state's Fair Business Practice Act that the sperm bank had misrepresented to the public the quality of its sperm and its screening process. Now, this seemed a little eugenic, but in terms of bodily autonomy and wanting to make the choice of what sperm you get, I would not call this like mean or anything towards schizophrenics or anything like that. This is obviously still messed up. Um, Anyways, the Supreme Court of Georgia did not, however, permit the couple to sue over what is known as wrongful birth claims. These birth claims are negligence actions brought by parents based on the birth of a child with disabilities or genetic disorders because of the provider's failure to identify the risk. The case is still pending. Limited regulation. The Normans' lawsuit is hardly unique. Other families have sued sperm banks, often having donor-conceived children who wound up with a variety of genetic disorders. In many of these cases, the sperm banks said they routinely test sperm and include donors who could pass along genes that cause genetic diseases. In those instances, the families have grounds for accusing the sperm banks of fraud and negligence. Some donors conceived adults are also suing doctors who lied to the plaintiff's parents about those sperm they were receiving and instead used their sperm. Several states now ban this kind of fertility fraud, in quotes. Um, this limitation is on the rise because of the growing popularity of direct-to-consumer DNA testing, which makes it easier to identify previously anonymous sperm donors and to learn about genetic risks donor conceiving people may have inherited from them. It's also happening because of the absence of clear rules and laws regulating sperm banks. There is little regulation of reproductive technologies of any kind, including in vitro fertilization, a procedure that fertilizes the egg with sperm in the laboratory instead of the body and at the state or federal level. Well, at that point, like, you could just fake it behind closed doors in a lab. Like, that'll be easier to hide it from the public, what you're doing to get your results, you know? Anyways, because the government does not track artificial insemination, the number of donor conceived people is unknown. The federal government requires only that donated sperm and eggs be treated like other human tissue and tested for communicable diseases, infectious conditions that spread through viruses, bacteria, and other means, but not genetic diseases. There are also no federal requirements that sperm banks obtain and verify information about a donor's medical history, educational and background, or criminal record. Oh, this criminal record thing, man, even though it's not really true that there's like genetics to crime, it's still like, it's still in the, seems like there's a eugenic system in the sperm bank requirement ethics, but I can see how it's for a health, but it's still a little sad. Sad if like someone was actually able-bodied, but still like mentally ill or whatever, but they were just axed because they look funny or something, which sucks. What is the basis for these lawsuits? The allowable grounds for fertility negligence vary by state. Some states let families sue clinics that fail to screen donors, even when the parents seek damages associated with the birth of the child with the dangerous genetic disorder or condition. This would essentially allow a wrongful birth claim to go forward. But a growing number of states, at least 14 so far, prohibit such claims. That is leading many courts, like the Supreme Court of Georgia, to define the injury as distinct from the birth of the donor-conceived child. The end of anonymity. One complication in terms of resolving these disputes is that most sperm donations are anonymous, at odds with the donor's interest in keeping their identity as a secret. We argue our donor-conceived people's strong interest in learning about their donors, including their medical, educational, criminal history, and even identity. DNA tests, including direct-to-consumer kits like 23andMe and rendering donor anonymity impossible to maintain, and internet searches, as the Normans discovered, can make it possible to see whether the donor, once identified, is misrepresenting their donor personal information. States are beginning to set rules because Congress has taken no action regarding assisted reproductive technology since 1992. States have slowly begun to step in. In 2011, Washington required the disclosure of donor identifying information and medical history when a child turns 18. On January 1st, 2022, Connecticut enacted the Uniform Parentage Act, which is based on medical legislation drafted by a national nonpartisan commission to fill widespread legislative gaps. The measure requires that fertility clinics collect identification information from donors and indicate whether donors have agreed to disclose. This is something that should have been done a while ago. Like, you might as well have somebody come to you and give you their sperm or something. Um, like you meet them or something. Like this seems really weird that it's just like a finder's fee almost. Oh, so weird. Anyways, another pending measure in New York would require sperm and egg donor banks, quote, to collect and verify medical, educational, criminal, felony conviction history information from any donor. This legislation would also provide prospective parents who purchase eggs or sperm and donor conceived people with the right to obtain such information without personally identifying the donor. This option, well, that's fine too. I'm not saying you should identify yourself, but it's just, I can see it being easier than getting it from just a sketchy behind the scenes doctor situation. Not that I'm against doctors, but this seems like this is happening a lot. Anyways, this option could make it possible to preserve donor anonymity, at least theoretically. The bill was drafted at least partially in response to the experience of Laura and David Gunner, whose donor conceived son died of an opioid overdose. After their son's death, the Gunners learned that 5 years earlier the donor himself had died and that he had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. The donor had not disclosed his mental illness or hospitalizations for behavioral issues. Costs are not a barrier. Well, geez, speak for yourself and not everyone, geez. Anyways, it's possible that measures like the one pending in New York State would make fertility treatment somewhat more expensive. Currently, a vial of donor sperm may cost close to what? 1,000, with the donor often being paid up to 150. Okay. Oh. Okay. I guess that makes sense from a like we want it like I don't know how to quantify this right now. This is so strange. Genetic testing, however, might not add much to the cost because it would only be done once, rather than each time a patient obtains a vial of sperm. With artificial insemination, it's rare for a pregnancy to occur on the first or second try. As we learn from Tyler Sniff, an advocate for the New York bill and a director of the nonprofit U.S. Donor Conceived Council, DNA testing companies offers relatively inexpensive options that can cost less than $300. To be sure, disclosure requirements might overpromise how much prospective parents may learn about their future child, but we are certain that these issues will become even more critical as technology continues to outpace, and as donor conceived adults and an increased number of people who use sperm banks advocate for their interests. Um, yeah, as as convenient as sperm banks sound in the face of a declining population, this is just sketchy and weird, and I don't approve. Yeah, I would almost say tear down sperm banks, but I feel like that would just fucking Nazis out of the woodwork suddenly, because they don't get enough fucking. Ugh, so annoying. Man, I can't stand it. Alright, next article. Alright, so I think most of us have heard of this before. This is some fucked up shit. Um, alright. Sperm donor in the Netherlands fathers more than 500 children, foundation says. A mother of one of his children seeking to stop the man from donating. Wow. A 41-year-old man allegedly fathered more than 500 children in the Netherlands, according to the DonorKind Foundation, an organization that helps children born via sperm donations who are looking for their origins. DonorKind, which is based in Den Haag, Netherlands, confirmed in a statement that a generous serial donor would have given his sperm nationally and internationally. A lawsuit brought by the mother of one of his children is now seeking a Dutch court to help prevent the man from donating in the future. According to the Dutch medical guidelines, a donor can only father 25 children to avoid possible incest and psychological problems, but it's not considered a criminal offense to go over. The donor, who Dutch media identified as Jonathan M., was already excluded in 2017 from donating via Dutch Society of Obstetrics and Gynecology. At that part, at that time, he already fathered 102 babies from 11 different clinics, officials said. But it did not stop Jonathan, who is said to be a musician, to carry on his genetic contributions both online and internationally. It's just gross. Tees van der Meer, chairman of DonorKind, who was also conceived by sperm donation, told ABC News that his foundation received multiple phone calls from more than 30 mothers this week. Quote, "They were calling from all over the world," he said. They were very worried, wondering if their children would be coming from the same donor. Jonathan M. never mentioned the real number of children he truly had to the fertility clinics or to the mothers. Vandermeer said, adding that he's in regular touch with some of the mothers of Jonathan's 500 kids. The DonorKind president confirmed to ABC News that Jonathan M. even sees a few of his children. A few. That's nice. Okay. That's nice of you, dude. You got like all these kids and you just hug a few of them. Alright. Quote, "It needs to be flagged and to be fought. I can imagine how traumatic it can be," said Ins M., a 38-year-old who had a baby with an anonymous donor 2 years ago from the Netherlands. Her daughter will have the option to meet with her donor when she turns 16. DonorKind Foundation says it's now fighting against keeping donors anonymous as, quote, "it makes very complicated to control the number of children for each of them." According to Vandermeer, anonymity goes against the right of the child. Quote, I speak with children now adults who live in constant fears. They are afraid of having a relationship with their group siblings without knowing it. Okay, so you're talking to adults. This isn't really a children thing. So I can understand that the parents create the children and their personality and yada yada, but I mean, I don't think all the parents just and the children want to meet each other. So this is saying that this is like goes against the child when it's talking about an adult who's flashing back to themselves being a child. That doesn't count as the right for children. Jesus, that's stupid. Okay. DonorKind Foundation is also asking the Netherlands to destroy any of the samples Jonathan M. has stored, except those to be used by women who already had a baby via his donation and would like to give a sibling to their child. In the Netherlands, private or public clinics pay between 10 to 20 per sperm donation. Alright, so that's I don't get it. I don't know how you can have that many kids. Alright. So this annoyed me and it intrigued me a little bit. So this is really goofy and stupid. They're obviously not just doing it themselves. Like there has to be like a catch to this, you know? Alright, so this elite couple trying to breed for mankind's sake gets the Twitter treatment. An elite couple who say they're breeding to save global population may have made the news again. And this is the first time I'm hearing of it now, honestly, and quickly met the internet's wrath. Simone and Malcolm Collins have caused more than just a subtle stir on Twitter this week after appearing on the Telegraph article where they espouse pronatalism, a term which means pro-birth. Now, politically speaking, no, it doesn't just mean pro-birth or I want a child. That's not at all what that means. There's something a lot darker behind it. Anyways. Or it can, anyways. Like, I feel like pronatalists are also killing other people. But that's nor here nor there. Anyways. According to the piece titled Meet the Elite Couples Breeding to Save Mankind, this is becoming an increasingly popular movement within the Silicon Valley. Twitter CEO Elon Musk, for instance, has made 10 children with 3 different women, and believes civilization is going to crumble unless everyone starts to have more kids. Yes, when Roe was taken out, Elon Musk actually posted like stats of the declining birth rate, which is just really insensitive of the dude. Obviously, this is some dude who's a fascist now who the Taliban supports, so whatever. The Collins, who describe themselves as politically conservative, are also trying to stop global decline in population by personally having as many babies as possible. They told the newspaper they were aware that a focus of preventing falling birth rates is also linked to neo-Nazis, by personally but personally reject racism and the concept of the homogeneous population. They are instead hoping to have a diverse range of cultures. So, a movement of pronatalism, I don't think it'll just be a diverse range of cultures, um, unless your pronatalism involves fighting neo-Nazis. But I don't think you have the time to have babies if you're fighting Nazis, honestly. Anyways, Malcolm Collins also dismissed any links to Margaret Atwood's famous The Handmaid's Tale, saying his response is, quote, "Do you know what happens if we voluntary movement fails?" Ah, yes. This is going back to 1800s voluntary motherhood, where instead of feminists fighting for reproductive rights, suffragists were fighting for just bodily autonomy and personal space and the right to say no to their husband if they wanted sex, just that basic stuff. Just basic, what we teach to children, at least in my generation, like personal space and that. Anyways, he suggested that if the 8 billion members of the human race were an animal species, it would fall into the endangered category by now. I don't think we're breeding ourselves out of existence. Even if our society collapses, like economic numbers wise, I don't think that'll destroy us as a species. If anything, the economy should fail and our species should thrive, but our species should not thrive through our economy we have. Anyways, the couple have 3 children, one of whom went throughout genetic screening and embryo selection so she'd be less likely to become obese or suffer from anxiety, but are allegedly hoping to have at least 4 more. Naturally, Twitter has quick to jump on the pair and accuse them of promoting the dubious practice of eugenics. That's where you produce only to increase the chances of desirable characteristics. Safe to say, Twitter users are not a fan of that. Alright, so you see James Wong say, "The history of eugenics is fascinating for so many reasons, none more so than when we consider which people think of themselves as genetically superior." Alright, so if they're working to promote other cultures as well, this isn't really an issue, I guess, unless the catch is that everyone that's doing different cultures is white. uh, I hope not. Yeah. Alright. Tabitha McIntosh says, "Phew, good thing the elite couple breeding to save mankind, but worried that falling birth rates are also a common preoccupation of neo-Nazis and other ethno-nationalists. Don't look anything like fascists, just normal, ordinary elite breeders. Nothing to see here." I thought this was funny. And I would love to be worried and say this is a bunch of neo-Nazi stuff. I would. This is totally on the nose, but I don't know. I don't think I can. I might be in denial, right, guys? You think I'm just in denial? Like, this has to be a part of, like, some pro-natalist agenda in the sense of, you know, alright, Tory Graf going all out with the eugenics vibes now. Fuck's sake. Wow. What? Um, Sounds like a threat. I would watch this horror movie. Daniel Summers, I would love to, but I'm going to be busy all day dropping cinder blocks on my feet and I'm dreadfully behind schedule. Alright, so I feel like some of these are a bit insensitive to people who just want kids, but there are the point of the population rhetoric is usually about white birth rates. Unfortunately, if you're in America, are they going to help out Japan too? So helping out America is not going to help out the rest of civilization. If you want to help out, you should just help the rest of the nations, obviously. Okay. So, of course, plenty of Twitter users also took the concept and put their own favorite elite breeders, aka most chaotic TV couples, in the frame instead. Wow. Honestly, I think, alright, people on Twitter and fucking are insane. Alright, I get the picture, and I don't like it, but it's weird, but I don't want to be that worried about it. Alright, the last one I am reading for now is this messed up stuff. Apparently, Massachusetts becomes the first state to end the seventh state to end child marriage. UNICEF USA applauds the passage of Massachusetts budget bill that includes language making it illegal for anyone under the age of 18 to get married. Jesus Christ. On the July 2008, or sorry, I'm so tired. On July 28th, 2022, advocates in Massachusetts celebrated the end of the state's loophole law that permitted minors to wed. This major legislative accomplished was achieved thanks to the leadership of the Massachusetts Coalition to End Child Marriage and State Representative Kay Khan, UNICEF USA supporters who were part of a strong grassroots presence that helped change the conversation and move this important work forward. Massachusetts joins Delaware, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and Rhode Island, and becoming the seventh U.S. state to end child marriage. There is still work to be done. 43 more states have yet to enact legislation banning anyone under the age of 18 from getting married under any circumstances. What the? What? But not even the consent of the child? Even though that's still messed up, but there's no, like, there's no weird limit, like, weird, like, this makes it look good limit in some way. Alright. Child marriage is a domestic issue. In many American communities, an illusion persists that child marriage occurs only in developing countries. A 2020 survey found that nearly half of Americans polled believed that child marriage was already illegal in all 50 U.S. states. The remaining respondents believed that the practice was illegal in 5 or fewer states. Lack or public awareness remains the biggest hurdle to ending child marriage in the United States. UNICEF USA is dedicated to changing the conversation and tackling misconceptions surrounding this issue. Common myths about child marriage. Myth 1. Child marriage only occurs in the developing world. Between 2000 and 2018, almost 300,000 girls and boys in the United States were married before their 18th birthday. Jeez. Myth 2. Child marriage in the U.S. only affects children from particular ethnic and religious backgrounds. Child marriage impacts children of all ethnic, religious, racial, and geographical backgrounds. Well, that doesn't really explain anything, but... Myth 3. Child marriage is only legal in certain regions of the United States. Child marriage remains legal in 43 states throughout different regions of the United States. Myth 4. There's nothing I can do about child marriage. False. Child marriage policies are determined by individual states. It is up to state representatives, state senators, and governors to change the policy. State by state, UNICEF is working to support legislation prohibiting marriage before 18. Children need you to advocate on their behalf. Advocates Unite. UNICEF USA advocate Nesha Abaraj was in the front lines in the fight to outlaw child marriage in Massachusetts. She calls on the rest of the country to follow suit. Child marriage comes at the cost which no child should ever have to bear, she says. And goes on to say, I asked a state legislator in the 43 U.S. states where early forced and child marriages are still permitted to please end this practice now. Not for me or you, but for every child who dares to dream. Well, so, yeah, this is all just because we need workers, That's all America cares about. It really just, it's the demographic revolution, and we're still keeping it in the past with child marriage, and we're slowly inching it forward with child labor, actually. But that's off topic. Alright. Honestly, this article plays into the states that pretty much allow fertility fraud, They want you to have children no matter the cost. Alright. See ya, guys.